"Deputy, that man is impersonating federal law enforcement and trespassing on my neighborhood road." Marlene Pritchard shouted it from behind sunglasses big enough to hide a small conscience. She stood at the mouth of my gravel drive in white capris and golf club pearls. One manicured finger aimed at my son like she was announcing the winner of a game show no one else had agreed to play. Patrol lights bounced red-blue against my barn siding. Dust hung in the afternoon heat. My two grandkids stood frozen on my porch steps, one gripping a popsicle that had melted clear down to his wrist, both watching grown people fight over land they thought was theirs by volume alone. I'm Quinn Thompson, third-generation owner of Thompson Ranch. 50 acres of cattle land, Mesquite Line to the west, Creek Bend to the south, and a deed that was recorded 42 years before Marlene's subdivision had a name, a logo, or a decorative rock at its entrance. The truth in that moment was simple enough to fit on one page at the county clerk's office. We have never signed HOA covenants, never accepted HOA governance, never ceded ownership of our access road. But truth has never been the loudest thing in a confrontation. Theater is, and Marlene loved theater. By the time that deputy stepped out of his cruiser, she had already arranged her scene. Half a dozen subdivision residents idling in golf carts, 3 phones held high recording, and Marlene planted dead center like this was her press conference. She had one of those laminated folders under her arm, the kind she called community enforcement files, like she'd been sworn in by somebody higher than a neighborhood election and a Facebook poll. Eli stood 10 yards behind her, calm as a fence post in a storm, hands visible, jaw set. He'd driven up from the city that morning to spend the weekend with us. Same way he had done for years when we had heavy work. Post replacements, gate hinges, drainage trenching, and whatever my back had stopped pretending it could still do alone. If you looked at him in that moment, you'd think he was carved out of patience. If you looked at Marlene, you'd think patience was a violation she could fine. The deputy asked, "Ma'am, can you lower your voice and let me sort this out?" She lowered it exactly half an inch. He flashed a fake federal badge at residents and told people they had to leave this road. "This is an HOA common route." My laugh came out before I could stop it. Dry, tired, unbelieving. "Deputy, this is Thompson Ranch access. Always has been. We've got deed copies in the house if you need them." Marlene snapped her head toward me. "You are not in compliance with this community." I looked at her over my glasses. "I am not in your community." That had been the whole argument for the last 2 years, ever since Cedar Glen Estates went in on the old hay tract bordering our north fence. The developer had sold country living with curated standards, which apparently translates to retirees in golf visors deciding cattle smell like rebellion. At first, the homeowners waved when they passed. Then they started cutting across our side road to shave 30 seconds off school-run traffic. Then came the tire ruts in wet pasture, then gates left open. Then one near miss with a calf that wandered toward the ditch after someone failed to latch a chain. I put up polite signs. Private ranch road. No through traffic. Those signs lasted about a week before somebody accidentally clipped one with an SUV. Then Marlene got elected HOA president and started introducing herself as if she came with municipal authority. She called meetings hearings. She called neighbors constituents. She called me non-compliant. The first time she came to my porch, she brought a basket of muffins and a packet of HOA bylaws, smiling like a real estate brochure. "We'd love to harmonize your property standards with the subdivision aesthetic," she said. I handed the packet back untouched. "Ma'am, my aesthetic is cows." She didn't laugh. From there, it was letters tucked in our gate. Courtesy reminder. Second notice. Violation opportunity to cure. All printed with legal-sounding headers and zero legal relevance to my land. I answered once in writing, with a copy of our deed and the county plat map, certified mail. Thought maybe fax would do what politeness hadn't. Marlene sent back a one-line response. Rural assumptions do not supersede community governance. That was when I learned she didn't misunderstand boundaries. She rejected them. Still, we kept our heads down. We worked our ranch. We mended what got broken. We didn't attend HOA meetings. We didn't engage in gossip wars. We figured eventually they'd run out of outrage when they realized we weren't playing. Peace in HOA revenge world reads as weakness. And Marlene had decided my family was her final compliance trophy. 3 mornings before the sheriff's scene, Eli rolled in with his toolbox and post driver before sunrise. He hugged me, kissed his kids on the forehead where they were still asleep under cartoon blankets in the guest room, and drank coffee leaning against my kitchen counter while I ran through the list. Cattle guard first, I said. Then north signs. We'll set steel posts this time, not wood. He nodded. I brought the permit packet and county correspondence. If she shows up, we document and stay boring. That was Eli. Practical. Controlled. Never gave people more heat than needed. He worked in investigations, government, paperwork, heavy, always maddeningly careful about what details he could share. I knew enough to know he understood procedure and chain of evidence better than most county attorneys I'd met. I also knew he didn't bluff. By 8:30, he had the old gate lip cut and the new cattle guard seated in compacted gravel. Legal, permitted, inspected path control for livestock and unauthorized vehicle traffic, exactly what the county suggested after repeated cut-through complaints. We set 3 new signs at eye level. No trespassing, private agricultural access, violators subject to prosecution. At 9:15, Marlene arrived in a white SUV with a magnetic placard on the door that said, Cedar Glen HOA President. Like she was law enforcement for hydrangea beds. She didn't greet us. She walked straight to the gate and zip-tied a bright orange paper over our new sign. Across the top, in bold caps, it read, Notice of Community Enforcement. Underneath, unauthorized obstruction of HOA common element. Immediate removal required. Eli stepped toward her, hands open. Ma'am, you cannot post notices on private property. Please step back beyond the fence line. She smirked. Who are you to instruct residents? Authorized representative of the property owner, he said evenly, then showed her a credential wallet just long enough for identification. You need to leave now. She leaned in as if trying to read it and laughed. Cute prop. Then she pivoted for her audience, because yes, there was already an audience. 2 dog walkers, 1 teen on a bike, and a man in a golf shirt pretending to check his mail for 10 straight minutes. Marlene lifted her phone, hit speaker, and said loudly, Sheriff Dispatch, I need immediate response. Armed male on HOA road threatening residents and impersonating federal law enforcement. I felt my stomach drop so hard it hurt. Armed? I said. He has a tool belt. She didn't look at me. She was busy narrating her own heroics into the phone. By the time 2 deputies arrived, the spectacle had multiplied. People came when they saw flashing lights the way crows come when one starts cawing. My grandkids drifted onto the porch because kids always know when adults are lying and somehow still need to see how it ends. The younger deputy asked Eli to keep his hands visible and step aside. Eli complied immediately, gave his ID, gave my name, gave parcel number, gave the same calm answer 5 different ways. I brought out our deed folder and county map tube like I was bringing exhibits to court. Because by then, that is what our driveway had become. Marlene kept injecting herself into every sentence. She's been hostile for months. He blocked emergency ingress. He threatened legal action against neighbors. At one point she said, "Their road is in our amended common area plan." I watched the senior deputy's face flatten in that cop way that means he has heard enough nonsense for one shift. He took my papers. He took Eli's identification. He walked the road line with us and found the old survey pin at the cottonwood stump. Same place my daddy showed me when I was 12 and learning where our north edge kissed what used to be open fields. 10 minutes later, he came back and said, "This appears to be private access under recorded deed." "Ma'am," to Marlene, "this is a civil boundary dispute, not criminal trespass by the owner's representative." Her chin lifted. He flashed a fake badge. The deputy looked at Eli. "Did you identify yourself?" I displayed credential to verify authority to request she leave private land. The deputy nodded once. "Understood." Marlene sputtered. "So you're just allowing intimidation now?" What the deputy said next is the only thing that kept me from exploding. "Ms. Pritchard, if you continue making knowingly false emergency reports, that can become a separate issue. I recommend all parties pursue this through civil channels." Civil channels. That phrase sounds neat on paper. In real life, it means expensive mail, waiting periods, forms, and people like Marlene mistaking delay for victory. When patrol cars finally rolled out, Marlene stayed behind long enough to smile at me like she had just warmed up. "You can still avoid escalation," she said. "Sign the compliance agreement." I stared at her orange notice flapping on my gate in the wind and said, "Take your paper off my fence." She didn't. Eli cut it down with a utility knife after she drove away. That evening, we ate dinner at my table with the windows open to the south pasture and the smell of rain coming over dry grass. Nobody talked much. My daughter-in-law kept glancing toward the driveway every time headlights passed on the county road. My grandkids asked if the police lady was coming back. I told them no, with the kind of certainty adults borrow when we don't have it. After the kids were down, Eli and I sat on the porch with 2 untouched beers sweating between us. "She won't stop," I said. He didn't answer right away. "No, she won't. Not because of the road either." "Then why?" "Control," he said, "and precedent. If she forces one holdout to submit, everyone else gets easier." I rubbed my temples. "I don't have time for this circus. Calving starts in 3 weeks. We've got fencing on the east line already failing and feed costs up again. I can't spend every morning arguing over a road that's ours." "That's exactly what pressure campaigns are for," he said quietly. "Wear you down until a bad deal looks like peace." That was the real stake, laid plain between us. This ranch isn't a hobby parcel. It isn't nostalgia with tax deductions. It is our livelihood, our collateral, our family history, and the land my grandfather paid for with 20 years of dawn starts and 1 truck that barely ran downhill. If we signed HOA covenants just to end it, we would hand a private board power over ranch operations they don't understand. When we can move cattle, what vehicles can enter, what structures qualify as aesthetic, whether manure odor is a violation, whether a stock trailer is commercial blight. One bad vote at one board meeting, and we could be fined for doing the very work that keeps this place alive. And fines weren't the only threat. False complaints bring deputies to your gate with limited facts and high adrenaline. Confused drivers taking shortcuts through pasture can spook a herd straight through fencing. A cut wire on the wrong night can cost a calf by morning. Legal fees siphon money that should buy hay, vet care, equipment repairs. Stress erodes judgment, and on a ranch, bad judgment compounds fast. But maybe the deepest stake sat in my grandkids' faces on that porch. The lesson about whether loud liars get to rewrite reality if they keep calling authorities until someone gives up. I wouldn't teach them that lesson. Not on my land. The next morning, I made copies of everything. Deed, plat maps, tax records, easement language, incident report number from the sheriff call, photos of the posted notice, timestamps of Marlene on the property. I started a binder thick enough to stop a door. I sent one more certified letter to the HOA requesting formal mediation and immediate cease of trespass activity. Polite, precise, documented. By noon, a new envelope appeared zip-tied to my gate. Final demand, it said. I stood there in the heat with that paper in my hand, listening to my cattle shift in the shade and a lawn crew buzz somewhere beyond the subdivision wall. And I understood we were past neighbor disagreement. This was a campaign. If Marlene wanted authority theater, she had picked the wrong stage. I didn't know yet how far she'd push. I only knew one thing for certain. We were done absorbing blows and calling it patience. I carried that final demand into the house, laid it on the kitchen table, and took a photo before I even unfolded it. That was the new routine. Photograph, timestamp, log, file. The paper was 2 pages of legal cosplay. Paragraphs about common element obstruction, unsafe agricultural nuisance, and a demand that we remove the cattle guard within 48 hours or face fines, collections, and all available remedies, including lien action. Lien action. On land they didn't own. I laughed once, sharp and humorless, then called Eli in from the mudroom. He read it standing up, thumb rubbing the edge of the page. They're escalating language on purpose. This is pressure copy. Pressure copy doesn't file liens, I said. No, he said. But people who send pressure copy often try anyway. I went to my desk, pulled out county contact info, and called the clerk's office before I could talk myself into waiting. The woman on records recognized my name by the second sentence. You're the ranch next to Cedar Glen, right? Unfortunately. She sighed in that way county employees sigh when they've already heard too much nonsense, and it's only Tuesday. Mr. Thompson, we can't stop anyone from mailing threats. But if anything gets filed against your parcel, you'll receive official notice. Keep documenting. I'm already building a library. Good, she said. Make it a museum. By sunset, I'd done 3 things. Sent the HOA another certified cease and desist for trespass and fraudulent collection threats. Filed an informational complaint with the county attorney's intake line, and dropped copies of all prior incident materials with the sheriff's records desk so the next responding deputy didn't arrive blind. I kept everything boring. That was the strategy. Marlene did not keep anything boring. 3 days later, we got our first fine statement. $300. Livestock odor. Impacting community enjoyment. $250. Unapproved agricultural structure. Hay shed. $150. Commercial vehicle presence. Stock trailer. Total due in 10 days. Late fees thereafter. At the bottom, failure to remit may result in lien processing against applicable parcel. I propped that one against the coffee maker so I couldn't avoid looking at it, not because I believed it, because I needed to absorb the shape of what she was doing. This wasn't one argument about a road. She was building a paper stack designed to look official enough that banks, buyers, deputies, and scared neighbors might treat us like a problem property. I answered each line item in writing, same day. Livestock odor. Agricultural use permitted and primary under county zoning designation. Hay shed. Existing structure predates subdivision construction. Permitted under county file number redacted. Stock trailer. Personal ranch equipment not commercial fleet operation. Attached, deed excerpts, zoning letter, permit copies, photos with dates, county plat, and a short note requesting mediation with an independent neutral. Polite, precise, certified mail. Her response came through HOA counsel this time, on expensive letterhead. Cease and desist interference with community management operations. It accused me of harassing board members, defaming association leadership, and obstructing maintenance of shared access and greenbelt improvements. It demanded I stop threatening legal consequences for board entry onto HOA-adjacent corridors. I read it twice, then called the attorney whose name was signed at the bottom. Voicemail. I left exactly one message. Counselor, this is Quinn Thompson regarding your letter dated today. My parcel is not HOA governed, and any entry onto my fenced property is trespass. Please advise your client accordingly. This call is being logged. No theatrics, just record. By the weekend, Marlene had moved the fight online. My daughter-in-law showed me the neighborhood Facebook group on her phone, jaw tight. Cedar Glen Safety Watch. Residents, be alert near North Access. Non-compliant ranch occupants have confronted families and displayed possible fake credentials. Report suspicious behavior immediately. There were 40 comments by dinner. Half were the usual pile-on from people who had never set foot on my land. A few were uncomfortable but quiet. Are we sure that road is HOA? One man wrote, I've seen county markers there, might be private. His comment disappeared within the hour. Then came photos. Cropped shots of Eli carrying fence posts, captions like armed male patrolling. The weapon was a post driver. That night, I called the sheriff non-emergency line and asked to attach digital evidence to the existing incident number. Potential false public safety claims, I said. Pattern behavior. The dispatcher took it seriously. Email everything. Will append. By Monday, 2 things were true at once. The online noise was getting louder, and our actual ranch work was getting slower. I spent mornings drafting responses and afternoons fixing what people broke. Tire tracks through North Pasture, gate chain left unlatched, soda cans in the stock pond ditch. Nothing catastrophic, but each nuisance consumed time and attention, exactly as intended. Then Marlene sent a landscaping crew. I was mending a water line when I heard a gas-powered trimmer where no trimmer should be. I drove the mule up the north line and found 3 men in neon shirts cutting brush along my fence from the outside shoulder in, one already through the wire where our corner dipped near the drainage swale. "Kill it!" I yelled. One worker shut off his trimmer, startled. Another kept running a string cutter until I stepped between him and the post. "Who authorized this?" I asked. The foreman held up a work order on a clipboard. Cedar Glen Board, Greenbelt Restoration, North Corridor. I pointed at my survey stake 6 feet away. That corridor is my fence line. You just cut private fencing. He looked over my shoulder, saw the brand mark on our gate, and muttered something in Spanish to his crew. They backed off. I took photos of the damage, work order, truck plates, and GPS pin on my phone. Then I called the sheriff. Deputy Raines, the senior from the first day, arrived 20 minutes later, looked at the broken wire, the displaced post, and my binder copies, like he'd expected this exact scene eventually. "You want trespass and property damage report?" he asked. "Yes." He took statements from the crew. Foreman said they were told HOA owns to the ditch. Raines asked who told them. Foreman gave a company owner name and said all coordination came through Ms. Pritchard. As he finished writing, Marlene pulled up. Of course she did. She got out already, speaking at full volume. "Deputy, these workers are under board contract. He is interfering again." Raines held up a hand without looking at her. "Ma'am, stop. I'm taking a damage report." Her smile hardened. "On behalf of whom?" He turned, looked her dead on, and said, "The property owner." She pivoted to me. "Your manufacturing incidents." I pointed at the severed fence. "You manufactured that with hedge trimmers." She stepped closer, voice dropping syrup sweet. "You could end this. Sign the maintenance easement and community compliance annex. No fines, no friction, no more misunderstandings." There it was. Not confusion. Leverage. I said, "Get off my land." She did, but not before making 2 calls from her SUV. I know because 40 minutes later, dispatch phoned me asking whether an agitated outsider male was currently threatening HOA residents near North Access. Outsider male. Eli was in my barn, replacing a hinge at the time. That was the week the pattern crystallized. She'd push a boundary, we'd document and report, she'd counter-call law enforcement with a safety spin. And every response cost us time, money, or calm. Legal invoices started stacking on my desk. Initial consultation, demand response drafting, title review, injunction prep retainer. Feed bill due same week. Transmission on the ranch truck slipping. Calving supplies to order. One evening, I sat at my table doing math in pencil, crossing out numbers until they fit. My daughter-in-law came in quietly and set a bowl of stew down beside me. "You haven't eaten." "Not hungry." She looked at the papers. "Is this bad? I rubbed my eyes. "It's expensive bad. We can cover it for now. But this is what she wants. Bleed us with paperwork and stress." She leaned on the chair opposite me. "The kids heard sirens again today and asked if they're coming for Daddy." That hit harder than any legal letter. I pushed my chair back, stood, and walked out to the porch where dusk was flattening everything into silhouettes. Tank, barn, mesquite, fence line. This land had weathered droughts, flood years, market crashes, and one wildfire that took our south pasture down to charcoal and prayers. It would weather Marlene too. But weathering had a cost unless I changed strategy. Up to then, I had been proving she was wrong. I needed to prove she was doing it on purpose. The next morning, I called a licensed surveyor named Thomas Velez, recommended by a rancher friend 2 counties over. He came out with a tripod, old-school patience, and the kind of skepticism I trust in people who measure land for a living. "Show me where the headache starts," he said. I walked him north. He found our original monument pins, cross-checked bearings, then requested copies of the HOA amendment packet Marlene kept citing in letters, specifically the exhibit map that supposedly folded our access corridor into common operational route. I already had a photocopy from one of her notices. Thomas unfolded it on his truck tailgate, squinted, and let out a low whistle. "This map's been redrafted from a prior plat," he said. "In English?" "In English, this boundary call is wrong in a convenient direction." He tapped 2 points on the exhibit. "See this line?" They shifted reference from monument to centerline approximation, then treated the shoulder as controlled area. Looks technical, isn't. If this was submitted as if it were survey grade, it's misleading at best. He asked me for formal authorization to pull the county-recorded amendment filings and associated exhibits directly. I signed before he finished the sentence. 2 days later, he called me back to his office trailer near the highway and laid out 3 documents side by side. 1. Original subdivision plat, recorded years ago. 2. HOA amendment vote packet exhibit, stamped informational boundary schematic. 3. A later board memo citing that schematic as operational authority for maintenance and access enforcement. The schematic line swallowed our corridor, not legally, graphically, strategically. Tomas didn't dramatize. They used a non-binding diagram to imply control where none exists, then acted on it like deed authority. My hands went cold, then hot. Can that be challenged cleanly? Easily, if you have counsel and a judge who can read exhibits. Harder if nobody sees it. I saw it. Finally, clearly. This wasn't Marlene misunderstanding plats. It was boundary inflation dressed up as governance. I left Tomas's office with a certified preliminary survey packet and a headache behind my eyes from clenching my jaw for too long. Eli was waiting at the ranch when I got back, sitting on the tailgate with 2 folders and that same measured look he gets when he's about to say something he'd rather not. "How bad?" he asked. I handed him Thomas's packet. He flipped pages, paused at the overlay comparison, and exhaled through his nose. "Yeah, that tracks. You don't sound surprised." He looked out at the pasture before answering. "Because I've been seeing adjacent pieces." "Adjacent to what?" He was quiet for a few seconds. Then he made a decision right there. I could see it happen in his face. "Dad, I need to tell you something I've kept compartmented." I sat down beside him. "I'm not just in investigations," he said. "I'm a federal special agent with USDA Office of Inspector General." I stared at him. USDA OIG. He nodded. "My unit works grant fraud, procurement abuse, false statements tied to federally funded programs. I didn't tell you specifics because I can't discuss active matters casually, especially with family directly in civil conflict." I felt 2 things at once: pride and irritation. "You let your mother think you push papers." A ghost of a smile. "I do push papers, very aggressively." "Is Marlene in one of your cases?" "Not as a named target I can discuss," he said carefully. "But contractors repeatedly approved by Cedar Glen's board are on a review thread tied to wildfire mitigation grant reimbursements, irregular billing patterns, duplicate scope claims, sign-offs that don't match field conditions. Wildfire mitigation." My chest tightened. We'd all lived through that fire year. Money meant to reduce risk, getting skimmed through neighborhood contracts made me feel physically sick. He kept his voice even. "I'm not here in an official capacity on your property dispute. I need that line clear. But I can tell you this. Your instinct is right. This is pattern behavior, paper manipulation, authority overreach, pressure tactics, narrative control." I looked down at my hands, calloused and dirty, and suddenly trembling with anger that had nowhere immediate to go. "So what do we do?" He turned one of his folders toward me. Inside was a checklist in his handwriting. "Civil counsel. File for temporary restraining order, trespass, and false lien threats. Sheriff packet. Consolidated chronology, exhibits, call logs, social posts, damage photos. County, formal complaint, fraudulent collection practices plus boundary misrepresentation. Preserve evidence, no verbal-only exchanges, body cam requests when possible, all contacts in writing." "Boring," he said. "Documented, unimpeachable." "Deliberate," I said. "Exactly." For the first time in weeks, I felt my breathing settle into something like control. Not victory, not yet. But direction. That evening, we set up at my kitchen table like a war room for people who believe in paperwork more than shouting. I labeled tabs. Eli built a master timeline down to the hour. We drafted affidavits while the house went quiet and pasture wind rattled the pecan branches outside. At midnight, I signed engagement papers with a litigation attorney out of town, someone with zero social ties to Cedar Glen, and authorized immediate filing for injunctive relief. At 12:37 a.m., I slid the final packet into a banker's box and wrote across the lid in black marker, Thompson Ranch, evidentiary record. If Marlene wanted stage lights and spectacle, she was about to meet certified copies, sworn statements, and a judge's signature. And this time, we weren't waiting for her next move. At 12:52 a.m., Eli hit send on the injunction filing from my dining room table, and for about 30 seconds, the house felt still. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, county prefix, followed by an email stamped 12:52 a.m. with the subject line, recording alert. Action required. It wasn't a live call. It was an after-hours voicemail from Mountain Plains Title Services tied to that alert. I hit play on speaker. A clipped male voice said, Mr. Thompson, this is Mountain Plains Title Services. We received a same-day recording notice tied to parcel 17-443-09. There appears to be an assessment claim against your property from Cedar Glen HOA. We need clarification before we proceed with your pending equipment refinance. Please return this call at opening business hours. I stared at Eli. He was already opening his laptop again. Yesterday, before we even filed. I gripped the back of my chair hard enough my knuckles hurt. That lien is fraudulent. We are not HOA governed. By 1:30 a.m., our attorney had drafted emergency letters to title and our lender disputing lien validity and attaching deed evidence. By 2:10, Eli had added a new tab to the evidence index, Financial Interference / Recorded Claims. At 8:02 a.m., right when Mountain Plains opened, I called back on speaker. Quinn Thompson. Same clipped male voice. Mr. Thompson, thank you for returning the call. We received a same-day recording notice tied to parcel 17-443-09. There appears to be an assessment claim against your property from Cedar Glen HOA. We need clarification before we proceed with your pending equipment refinance. What assessment claim? I said, though I knew. Document type reads, Notice of Assessment and Intent to Perfect Lien. Recorded at 4:38 p.m. yesterday. Understood, sir. But a recorded cloud on title triggers internal hold. Please send legal documentation disputing authority. By morning, Eli said, leaning toward the phone. You'll have counsel correspondence by morning. The man gave us a case email and hung up. No shouting, no dramatic music. Just a normal business call that told me exactly how Marlene planned to win this. Not by proving she owned our road, but by poisoning every process around us until we couldn't function. At 6:15, before sunrise, I was in the barn loading feed tubs when my supplier texted, Morning, Quinn. Got notice your parcel has active legal encumbrance. Company policy says cash only until cleared. Sorry. Cash only on calving month inventory might as well be a tourniquet on the ranch's throat. I called him anyway. Ray, you've known me 20 years. I know, he said, sounding miserable. I hate this. But insurance and credit line audits are breathing down us. Clear title flag, we go back to terms. I hung up, walked to the tack room, and sat on an overturned bucket in the dark for a full minute, trying not to put my fist through the wall. If Marlene succeeded, we'd lose more than a road. We'd lose operating flexibility, lender confidence, maybe eventually the ranch itself under stacked pressure. Legal fees, cash flow squeeze, and public smear enough to make us look radioactive to anyone with paperwork authority. That afternoon, she pressed harder. A process server pulled into my driveway in a sedan and handed me a packet titled Notice of Hearing, HOA Enforcement Compliance. They'd set an internal board hearing for Thursday evening, to finalize penalties and authorize remedial access restoration. Remedial access restoration. New words for cutting my fence again. I called our attorney from the porch while reading line by line. Can they do anything with this? They can vote on whatever fantasy they like internally, she said. What matters is whether third parties treat it as real. We counter with court order and county confirmation. Keep documenting. Then she added, Quinn, if they've already recorded lien paper, expect a public spectacle soon. These actors escalate when they sense legal containment. She was right. By dinner, a printed flyer was circulating in Cedar Glen. Community Safety Action. Saturday 9 a.m. Board led North Access Reclamation. Law enforcement standby requested. It had Marlene's signature block at the bottom, like a mayoral proclamation. Thursday morning, our first blow landed before coffee. Court clerk called. Your ex parte TRO request has deficiencies. Judge requests in-person clarification regarding immediate irreparable harm and notice efforts. I wrote every word down and repeated it to make sure I heard right. Does that mean denied? Not denied, she said. Not granted yet. Earliest review slot is tomorrow, 4:15 p.m. Tomorrow, Friday at 4:15. For a Saturday event she'd already advertised. That wasn't a legal loss, but it felt like one. We had done everything by the book, and the book still ran on courthouse clocks. At 10:40 a.m., the second blow hit. My neighbor from the West Tract, old Ben Ortega, called breathless. Quinn, you need north pasture now. I got one of your red heifers down by County's shoulder. Looks bad. I don't remember hanging up. I remember running. The north chain gate was open. Chain dropped, latch bent backward. Tire marks cut across damp soil where no vehicle should have been since Tuesday's rain. Our heifer, tagged 27B, had pushed through toward the roadside culvert and been clipped by a pickup. Not killed instantly. Broken foreleg, deep chest trauma, shock. Our vet arrived in 15 minutes and still shook his head after 5. I held her halter while he administered euthanasia. She was 3 years old and heavy with our best spring line. Financially, it was a loss. Operationally, worse. Emotionally, it felt like someone reached into my livelihood and twisted. Deputy Raines came again, photographed latch damage and tracks, took Ben's statement, took mine. Any camera coverage here? He asked. Not on that corner yet. He nodded, unhappy. Without direct visual, we document criminal mischief and negligent gate breach unknown person. Given ongoing dispute, I'll cross-reference prior incidents. Unknown person. Again. By afternoon, social media had already turned it into our fault. If ranch animals are dangerous, maybe they shouldn't be by a family road. HOA warned him to secure access. I wanted to throw my phone into the stock tank. Instead, I screenshotted every post and saved the URLs. At 6 p.m., I went to the HOA hearing anyway, against every instinct, because our attorney said presence mattered for record. She joined by video. Eli sat beside me in the back of Cedar Glen's clubhouse while Marlene called order with a gavel she absolutely did not need. She read violation totals like she was announcing auction bids. $4,850 in cumulative fines. Recommendation to authorize lien perfection and self-help restoration of North Access. When our attorney's turn came, she spoke calmly into the room speakers. Thompson Ranch is outside HOA jurisdiction. Continued collection attempts constitute potential fraudulent practices. Any board entry onto Thompson parcel after this notice will be treated as intentional trespass. Marlene smiled at the camera. Council's rural theatrics are noted. Then she called for vote. 4 board members present. 3 yes. 1 abstain, visibly pale. Motion passed. I stood to leave before I said something useful to no one. Eli touched my sleeve, a quiet warning and support at once. In the parking lot, under those decorative string lights they call community charm, I finally broke. "I'm losing cattle while she runs committee theater," I said, voice raw. "We file, we document, we do everything right, and she keeps moving first." Eli didn't give me the usual strategic answer. He just said, "I know." For the first time since this started, I believed we might still lose, even if truth was on our side. That night, after everyone went quiet, I found Eli's wife sitting alone on the back steps, knees pulled up, phone dark in her hand. Her name is Hannah. She had been carrying this whole mess with us while raising 2 kids in a house where sirens had become a sound cue for fear. "You okay?" I asked. She gave a small laugh that cracked in the middle. "No." I sat one step below her and waited. She spoke to the dark pasture, not to me. I used to think Eli's calm meant safety, like if he stayed level, the world would level with him. She pressed her thumb into her palm, hard. Now I watch him be calm while people lie about him to police, and I can't tell if that calm is strength or if he's disappearing into work mode and leaving us behind. I stayed quiet. She kept going, words gathering speed. When he first joined federal service, there was this training period where he couldn't tell me details. I understood the rules. But one night he came home with a split lip and said he walked into a cabinet. She shook her head. He thought I believed him. I didn't. I just learned that loving someone in this line of work means sometimes getting half-truths for your own protection. Wind moved through the pecans. She wiped her face and looked almost angry at herself for crying. "I hate that this is happening at your ranch," she said. "I hate that the kids ask if Daddy's in trouble. I hate that part of me wants him to stop helping and take us home where it's boring and no one knows our name." Her voice dropped. "And I hate that if he did that, I'd resent him for leaving you to fight alone." That was the most honest sentence I'd heard all week. She drew a long breath, then said what was underneath all of it. "I'm scared he'll do the right thing in exactly the right way and still get hurt by someone who lies better." I put my hand over hers. "You get to be scared." She nodded, tears fresh now. "I feel guilty for being scared. Like I'm adding weight when everyone's already carrying too much." "You're not adding weight," I said. "You're naming it." She leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I love him, but I don't always know where the man ends and the badge begins when things get like this." There it was. Love without sentimentality, just truth and cost. When she finally stood, she looked steadier, not because anything was fixed, but because she'd said the hard part out loud. "Tell me what I can do tomorrow." "Keep the kids with you in the house if vehicles show up," I said. "And if I start matching Marlene's volume, remind me who I am." "Deal," she said. Friday moved like a wire pulled too tight. At 9:20 a.m., our attorney filed supplemental affidavits: dead livestock loss, gate damage photos, lien recording copy, HOA vote minutes, and Thomas's certified overlay showing the inflated corridor claim. At noon, sheriff records confirmed they'd flagged Marlene's prior calls for pattern review, but could not preemptively block a civil standby request, if filed, for peacekeeping. In plain terms, deputies might still show up Saturday if she invited them into her theater. At 2:05 p.m., a tow company truck rolled slowly past our gate, paused, and took photos. Didn't enter, just documented. At 3:11, my phone pinged with a mass email forwarded by a sympathetic Cedar Glen resident. From Marlene Pritchard, HOA President. Subject: North Access Reclamation Logistics deputies requested for standby. Contracted tow and barriers arriving 8:45 a.m. Saturday. Board asserts full rights under amended community boundary exhibit. Residents welcome to observe from designated safe zone. Designated safe zone. She was planning an audience again. At 4:15, Eli and I sat in the courthouse hallway outside Judge Harrow's chambers while our attorney argued urgency. Through the door's muffled wood, I could hear the cadence of legal language. Irreparable harm, likelihood of success, balance of equities, status quo preservation. At 5:02, the clerk came out with a thin stack and said, "Judge is reviewing. You'll be notified tonight if order is signed." Tonight, if. Courthouse closed behind us at 5:30. Sunset burned orange over the highway as we drove home in silence, each of us running worst-case math in our own head. If no order by morning, Marlene would arrive with cameras, tow truck, and deputies to reclaim land she never owned. If we physically blocked, we'd risk the exact confrontation she wanted. If we stepped aside, she'd breach the fence line again and claim practical control. At 7:48 p.m., Deputy Raines called me directly. "Mr. Thompson, giving you courtesy notice. We received a civil standby request for your address tomorrow at 0900 tied to HOA access enforcement claims. I can't adjudicate title roadside. If you have court orders, have hard copies ready." My throat went dry. "Understood." I hung up and looked out toward the gate, where darkness had swallowed everything but the reflector posts. Inside, Hannah was getting the kids bathed early in case morning turned loud. Eli was at the table rechecking document tabs for the 10th time. My banker's box sat open like a toolbox for a different kind of storm. At 8:26, no call from the clerk. At 8:41, still nothing. Wind rose out of the south, rattling the porch screen in short, nervous bursts. I set the deed binder on the counter, lined up 3 printed survey copies, and waited for a phone that might not ring before sunrise. At 8:57 p.m., the phone finally rang. I snatched it up before second ring. Thompson. "Mr. Thompson, clerk's office. Judge Harrow signed your temporary restraining order at 8:46. We've emailed certified copy and stamped service packet, effective immediately." For a second, I couldn't speak. I just looked at Eli across the table. He was already reading my face. "Got it?" he asked. I nodded once, hard. The clerk kept talking. "You must serve opposing party and have order available on site if contact occurs." "We will," I said. "Thank you." When I hung up, nobody cheered. We were too tired for that. Eli printed 3 copies. I slid one into a clear sleeve with the survey overlay and deed page behind it, like I was holstering a sidearm. At 10:12 p.m., I texted Deputy Raines. "Court order signed. Hard copies ready for morning." At 5:40 a.m., I was at the gate with coffee gone cold in my hand and the TRO folder tucked under my arm. By 8:43, the first SUV rolled up. By 8:51, there were 12. Marlene arrived at 8:55 in a cream blazer like she was hosting ribbon cutting. Behind her, an HOA tow truck, 2 men unloading portable barriers, and a cluster of Cedar Glen residents filming from what she had called the safe zone on her email. At exactly 9:02, 2 sheriff cruisers came in slow, dust lifting behind them. Deputy Raines stepped out of the lead unit, one hand resting on his vest, expression already exhausted. A second deputy stepped out of the trailing unit and held back near the shoulder. Marlene moved first, voice bright and loud for the phones. "Deputy, thank you for attending. We're here to execute board-authorized restoration of community access and remove unlawful obstructions. The armed individual from prior incident," she pointed at Eli, "is again present and should be detained if he interferes." My pulse hit my throat. But I remembered Hannah's words. If I start matching Marlene's volume, remind me who I am. So I stayed where I was. I let her finish. Then I stepped forward, folder open. Deputy Rains, Quinn Thompson, property owner. Before anyone takes another step, I need this entered on record. I handed him the top page. He scanned the heading, then flipped to the judge's signature. Temporary restraining order. Marlene laughed too loudly. That can't be valid. We have board authority. Rains held up a hand toward her without looking away from the paper. Ma'am, quiet while I read. The crowd noise thinned. You could hear the tow truck engine idling. Rains read aloud, because that's what good deputies do when they know a scene is being filmed. Respondents Cedar Glen HOA, and agents are restrained from entering, altering, removing, or claiming control over parcel 17-443-09 pending hearing. Includes North Access Corridor as described by attached survey. He turned to me. You got proof of service? Service packet ready. Process server en route to HOA office. Email service completed to listed counsel at 7:11 a.m. I handed him printed confirmations. Marlene's face tightened. This is procedural abuse. We weren't properly noticed. Eli spoke for the first time, calm and clear. You were noticed? Timestamp in deputy's hand. She snapped toward him. You do not speak in my proceeding. Rains looked up, flat. This isn't your proceeding. One of the towmen leaned out his window. We moving that great or what? Truck stays put, Rains said without turning. Marlene stepped closer to him, voice dropping into that syrup command tone she used on contractors. Deputy, you are witnessing unlawful obstruction of a community route. I am instructing our vendor under board vote. Rains finally looked straight at her. I don't take instructions from HOA presidents. A few phones lowered right there. She pivoted to the crowd, hands out like she was pleading to a jury. Everyone, this is exactly the intimidation we've documented. They weaponize paperwork and... Ms. Pritchard. I kept my voice even. You're currently on my deeded land despite a court order. Step back to county shoulder. She ignored me and took 2 steps closer to the cattle guard. That was when Eli moved. Not fast, not aggressive. Just one deliberate step forward, clear of my shoulder where every camera could see him. He reached into his jacket, drew out his credential wallet, and flipped it open at chest height. On record, he said, voice carrying clean across gravel. My name is Eli Thompson. I am a special agent with the United States Department of Agriculture, Office of Inspector General. The air changed. You could feel it. He looked at Marlene, then at Deputy Rains. I am not acting here as local enforcement. I am serving notice as authorized federal personnel regarding records preservation obligations. From a document sleeve, he withdrew a single-page notice and extended it. Marlene Pritchard, as HOA President and Custodian of Board Communications, Contractor Approvals, and Reimbursement Submissions, you are hereby directed to preserve all relevant records, electronic and paper, concerning wildfire mitigation grant-related contracts, payment approvals, boundary exhibits used in enforcement actions, and prior law enforcement reports. Destruction or alteration after notice may constitute separate violations. Marlene stared at the page like it was written in fire. This is retaliation, she said. You can't ambush me with federal... It's not an ambush, Eli said. It's notice. Receipt acknowledged by your signature or deputy witness. She did not take the paper. Rains stepped in, took it, read the header, then said, I'll witness tender. Time 9:11. The second deputy activated his body mic with an audible click and repeated, Body cam active. Civil standby converted to order enforcement and documentation. Marlene's command voice cracked for the first time. This is absurd. You're all colluding with anti-community actors over landscaping invoices? No one said landscaping. Eli said quietly. That landed harder than shouting would have. Behind her, one resident whispered, "Wildfire grants?" Another answered, "What did she sign?" Marlene spun toward the tow truck and snapped, "Proceed. They can sort it in court." Raines took one step toward the driver and pointed to County's shoulder. "Sir, if your wheels cross onto this parcel after notice, you risk criminal trespass. Put it in reverse." The driver looked from him to Marlene, then put it in reverse. It beeped, backing out, loud and humiliating. Marlene started talking over everyone at once. Abuse, vendetta, you'll all be sued. Words tumbling now, less command than panic. Raines asked her twice to lower her voice. On the third time, he said, "Ma'am, continued disruptive behavior after warning may result in citation." She froze, then snapped her sunglasses off like she needed a new prop. Her eyes were sharp, furious, and suddenly unsure. I held her gaze and said, clear enough for every camera, "You don't govern this ranch. You never did." For once, she had no line ready. She got in her SUV so hard the door bounced. As she peeled away, gravel sprayed, and somebody in the crowd muttered, "She's done." I didn't answer. I just exhaled for what felt like the first time in a month. She wasn't done. By 11:30 a.m., edited clips were already online. Me holding papers with captions about weaponized courts, Eli's badge frame frozen under fake federal intimidation, and a post from Marlene claiming she was targeted by corrupt local actors to conceal ranch safety violations. At 12:10, our attorney called. She just filed emergency motion to dissolve TRO and alleges ex parte fraud by omission. On what basis? Her basis appears to be confidence. By 2 p.m., she had her attorney file a supplemental declaration attaching the same inflated HOA exhibit Thomas had already debunked. She also submitted an affidavit claiming the sheriff endorsed HOA access rights on scene. Raines did not appreciate being volunteered. Monday morning, we were in Judge Harrow's courtroom for the TRO challenge and preliminary injunction hearing. I wore my only suit, still smelled faintly like feed room no matter what I did. Marlene sat at petitioner table in pearls again, chin up, legal pad full of underlines. When called, she testified like she was reading campaign copy. Our board acted in good faith for community safety. Mr. Thompson has been hostile and obstructive. We relied on our amendment map and advice of counsel. Our attorney stood for cross. Miss Pritchard, Exhibit B. You represented this as a boundary authority map? Yes. Is Exhibit B a licensed survey? It is an official community map. That was not my question. Is it a licensed survey? She hesitated. No, but... Thank you. You filed collections and lien notices based on this non-survey, correct? We filed based on governance rights. Over a parcel you knew was deeded outside your declaration? I did not know that. Our attorney held up a certified letter I'd mailed 8 months prior with deed and plat attached, signed for by Marlene. This is your signature on receipt? Marlene looked at it and said, I received many documents. Judge Harrow cut in. Answer yes or no? Yes. Next came Deputy Raines, subpoenaed with body cam extracts. He testified cleanly. He had repeatedly advised this was civil, had never endorsed HOA ownership, and had warned against false reports. Then Thomas testified with overlays on a screen big enough nobody could hide behind jargon. He walked monument points, legal descriptions, and the precise directional shift in Marlene's exhibit. It visually expands HOA operational assumption into non-HOA land, he said. Not legally valid. Marlene's attorney tried to muddy with technicalities. Tomas swatted each one calmly. When my turn came, I spoke plain. My family never asked to run anyone else's neighborhood. We asked to be left on our own land. Every time we provided proof, Ms. Pritchard escalated. Fines, false claims, crews cutting fence, recorded encumbrance interfering with ranch financing. We seek one thing: enforce boundaries by law so this stops. Judge Harrow recessed 30 minutes, longest 30 of my life. When she returned, she didn't waste words. TRO is extended to preliminary injunction. Cedar Glen, HOA, and Ms. Pritchard are enjoined from enforcement actions against Thompson parcel pending final adjudication. Recorded assessment notice is likely void on jurisdictional grounds. Court orders immediate release filing within 48 hours. Matter referred to county attorney for review of potential false filing and collection practices. Marlene stood before anyone dismissed. Your Honor, this is outrageous. I have served this community. Judge Harrow looked over her glasses. Sit down, Miss Pritchard, unless you wish your next words to be heard in contempt. She sat. Outside the courtroom, she tried one last pivot, turned to cameras and said, "This is temporary. We will prevail for homeowners." But half the homeowners there wouldn't meet her eye anymore. 2 days later, Cedar Glen held an emergency board meeting, packed wall to wall. I went because our attorney said local eyes mattered. A retired teacher from Lot 14 stood at the mic first. Did you or did you not expose us to legal liability by filing claims on land we don't own? Marlene gave her usual speech about leadership under pressure. Then a young couple asked why wildfire mitigation contractors were paid twice on overlapping invoices. Marlene called it clerical complexity. Then the board treasurer, quiet man, accountant type, stood and said into the microphone, voice shaking, "For the record, I requested independent review 3 times and was denied by President Pritchard." The room went dead silent. Motion to remove her was introduced from the floor under HOA bylaws. She argued procedure for 10 minutes. Vote was still taken. 67 for removal, 11 against. She held her gavel like it might still mean something, then set it down and walked out through a side door while people who used to clap for her stared at their shoes. Earned, not sudden. The next morning felt strange, in the best way. No engines at the gate. No bright envelopes zip-tied to wire. Just wind and cows and the clank of a loose latch I could fix without opening an evidence app. At 9 o'clock, I drove to county records with our attorney. Clerk printed the release instrument voiding the HOA assessment notice and slid it across the counter. Clouds lifted, she said. I put my palm on the page like checking for fever. You sure? She stamped 3 certified copies and smiled. As sure as ink gets. From there, we drove to Sheriff Admin. Captain Lewis met us in a beige office that smelled like copier toner and old coffee. He handed me a 1-page advisory. Dispatch flag added, he said. Future calls from Ms. Pritchard's listed address regarding your parcel will note prior false report concerns and require supervisor review before emergency escalation unless independent threat info exists. I read it twice. Not immunity. Nothing like that. Just context, finally. Thank you, I said. He nodded toward my binder. You did this right, Mr. Thompson. Most people either explode or disappear. You documented. On the way home, I detoured to the north corner where we lost 27B. I stood by the repaired gate, fingers on new steel latch, and let the quiet settle in my chest where adrenaline had lived too long. I didn't forgive anyone out there. I just acknowledged the cost. When I got back, Hannah was on the porch with both kids coloring at the table. She looked up before I said anything. Well, I held up the certified release. She closed her eyes, breathed out, and smiled for real. That evening, after the kids were asleep, I found Eli in the barn aisle checking mineral bags he'd already checked twice. Work is where he hides when feelings crowd him. Hannah's out back, I said. She needs you, not your inventory math. He gave me a tired half-smile. Yes, sir. I left them the porch and went inside. Through the kitchen window, I could see them in silhouette beneath the string light. Hannah wrapped in a sweatshirt, Eli leaning on the rail. I couldn't hear everything, but later he told me enough, and some parts I heard clear when the wind shifted. She started first. I've been angry at you. I know, he said. I needed you to say that without briefing me. A pause. Then Eli, voice rougher than I'd ever heard it. I thought if I stayed controlled, I could keep everyone safe. But I used control like distance. I gave you procedures when you needed me. She looked down at her hands. I needed honesty. Even if the honest answer was, I'm scared too. I was scared, he said immediately. I am scared. Not of Marlene, exactly. Of making one wrong move that drags you and the kids into my work world in a way I can't pull back. Of failing dad. Of you deciding this life is too much and being right. Hannah's shoulders dropped like she'd been carrying those words for months. I don't need zero risk. I need zero pretending. He nodded. Okay, then no pretending. I love you more than this badge. I love this family more than being the guy who can handle everything. If I ever start using silence as protection again, call me on it in real time. She gave a wet laugh. You're giving me permission to fight dirty. I'm giving you standing orders. She stepped closer. I don't want standing orders. I want partnership. You have it, he said. Fully. If a case limitation means I can't share detail, I will still share impact. I will not disappear behind can't discuss. And after this, I'm taking the transfer delay I kept avoiding. Fewer field hours, more home. She blinked. You'd do that? I should have done it when the kids started recognizing sirens, he said. I kept telling myself I had to be useful everywhere. Turns out useful starts here. Hannah put both hands on his face. I'm not asking you to be less of who you are. He covered her wrists gently. I know. I'm asking myself to be more of it at home. They stood there a long moment, foreheads touching, the kind of silence that means a decision is landed. Then she said, Okay, then here's mine. I'm done pretending I can white-knuckle this alone. I want us in counseling, before the next crisis, not after. Done, he said. I'll schedule it tomorrow. And family check-ins every Sunday, no phones. He smiled. Even football Sundays? Especially football Sundays. Cruel, he said, and she laughed through tears. He kissed her, slow, steady, not dramatic, and something in both of them unclenched. Not a movie ending. Better. An agreement made out loud. When they came inside later, Hannah squeezed my shoulder in passing. Eli caught my eye and just nodded. Message received. 10 days after the hearing, we sat in Mediation Conference Room B with Cedar Glen's interim board and their insurers' counsel. Fluorescent lights, bad coffee, everyone suddenly polite now that numbers were involved. Our attorney presented damages, fence repair invoices, livestock loss documentation, legal fees tied to wrongful enforcement, and recorded claim interference. They pushed back on the heifer. We pushed back harder with vet statement, deputy report, and gate photos. By 4:30 p.m., settlement terms were on paper. Full withdrawal and voiding of all fines, payment for documented fence and property damage, contribution to legal costs, written non-interference covenant, and board resolution acknowledging Thompson Ranch is outside HOA jurisdiction. I signed where my attorney tapped. So did their interim president, a red-faced dentist who looked like he wanted to retire from volunteer governance immediately. Outside, as we waited for copies, he said quietly, "Mr. Thompson, for what it's worth, some of us didn't know how far she'd gone." I believed him enough to nod. Federal folks moved on their own track. Eli never gave me details he couldn't, and I never asked beyond what he offered. One evening, he did say, "Records preservation notices matter because they freeze panic shredding." That was all. A week later, I drove past Cedar Glen Clubhouse and saw a cardboard box of old HOA signage by the curb. On top sat Marlene's laminated community enforcement placard, cracked down one side. At the ranch, ordinary returned in pieces. I replaced the last temporary wire on the north line with 4-strand barbed and steel T-posts sunk deeper than spite. We mounted 2 legal cameras at the corner gate. Not because I expected trouble, because documentation had become part of stewardship now. Saturday morning, Eli came out again. No patrol cars this time, just his old pickup and a thermos. He and I set a new sign together at the access entrance. Thompson Ranch, private agricultural road, no HOA jurisdiction. He held the post steady while I tamped gravel. "Too wordy?" I asked. He grinned. "Perfect." Around noon, the grandkids rode the fence line on ponies with Hannah walking beside them, calling out "heels down" and laughing when the little one lost a stirrup. Wind smelled like cut hay and sun-warmed dust. The south pasture cattle bunched at the trough, tails flicking flies, unconcerned with human governance. A sheriff cruiser rolled past on the county road, slowed, and kept going. No lights, no drama. I stood at the gate and watched the dust settle where so much noise had been. Months ago, this same stretch held flashing red-blue, phones in the air, and a woman in pearls declaring my son a fraud on my own land. Today it held hoof prints, tire ruts from feed delivery, and kids arguing about whose turn it was to open the latch. That was the correction I wanted all along, not chaos, not revenge for revenge's sake. Just truth with paperwork, boundaries with teeth, and a quiet driveway that belonged, legally, finally, unmistakably, to us.